Hello, everybody. It is 12:30 on Friday, the 20th of November, and I do hope you're all well. My name's Michelle Beckett from ADHD Unlocked, and I'm joined as ever for our Friday live lunch by Stephanie Camilleri,
Oh,
also from ADHD Unlocked. And all this week, we've been looking at a rather difficult topic, a topic that I have found more difficult than I thought to look into. I thought I'd done all this work this year, and that is the topic of the impact of intergenerational ADHD, more often than not undiagnosed, going back through maybe your parents, cousins, siblings, uncles, aunts, grandparents, because we do know that ADHD is mostly genetic in cause and nature. It is as hereditary as height. So it's bound to be the case more often than not that if you have ADHD or your children do, one or more of your parents do, or at least your grandparents, siblings, uncles, aunts. Now, we do know, as we have all experienced to some degree or another, that ADHD causes challenges and impacts throughout individuals' lives, through adulthood, and that could be in the form of alcoholism. We do know that up to 25% of people with substance abuse disorders and alcoholism have undiagnosed ADHD. Emotional dysregulation, there may have been violence, there may have been neglect, there may have been poverty, more likely to be unemployed, experience divorce. Your parents might not have been very present as a child. So that link between childhood trauma and ADHD, particularly undiagnosed ADHD, is something that we need to dig into. And actually, until you kind of look at your childhood wounds, those wounds will come out somewhere or other in adulthood in the terms of pain or in terms of how you view your relationships, etc., etc. So it's something that you do have to kind of process and heal from in order to really flourish with your ADHD. But I've not quite been myself this week, have I, Steph? Looking into it, it's very, very difficult for all of us.
yeah, no, I definitely noticed the difference with you this week, and it's very difficult. We really do face some confronting subjects. Like we did parenting last week, and this week we're doing parenting the other way in terms of the intergenerational impact of ADHD. And it's like with everything that we've touched upon, you got to name it to tame it. A lot of us ADHDers, a lot of us operate from autopilot. We don't quite dig deep. We've got a lot of blind spots. It's only when we stop, which is really difficult for us to do, and do by ourselves, that we can kind of see maybe some patterns or some things we need to look into. And definitely I think this is one of them.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it was the case that I did have a very difficult relationship with my mum. She died young. She died in her early 50s of breast cancer. She was a drinker. We didn't have a great relationship, but I could never heal from that. But actually, what's happened through looking at the lens of my relationship with my mum, through the lens of ADHD, it's been incredibly healing because I now know that she definitely had it. There's absolutely no doubt about that, and that I can forgive her and I can look at her father and his drinking and all of that and all the violence that she experienced and forgive her because she couldn't help it. And actually, she did her bloody best given that the childhood trauma that she had been through. So, really, really important that we look at that in terms of healing and actually coming to terms with your ADHD, Steph, as a whole. I don't think unless you kind of look at your family relationships and how ADHD is impacted there, you can fully come to terms with it, arguably. I don't know.
Yeah, look, completely. Again, different experiences I've had with you, but I suspect that, yeah, my parents as well, both of them have it. It explains a lot, even without knowing I had ADHD and without knowing about ADHD at all. As a child, right? You got to survive, and you got to, be able to forgive. And the thing is, you don't realize though what these strategies, how you can sometimes be carrying these strategies into adulthood. And as you were saying, Mish, it can very much impact your relationships. And yeah, and so it's like this pattern that you're not aware of that just continues. And the only way you can do anything about it is to identify it and get help as well. Because often these childhood, traumas and things, they need to be dealt with by professionals like therapists, but they can be, again, transformational when you can kind of identify it and do something about it.
Yeah. And one of the areas of research that I've been looking into this year is codependency. And so many of us adults with ADHD exhibit these codependent tendencies where we tend to feel less than. And in our relationships with significant others, we tolerate way more than we should, or we feel that this is the only love that we deserve, or we feel that love that's given too freely maybe is kind of a bit wrong because we've had to maybe fight for love as a child. So the love that we know is something that we have to fight for and gain attention for. We don't feel worthy. And this is one of the main areas to do with self-worth and to do with, you know, kind of flourishing in all areas of your life. And it's not just relationships with significant others. I've noticed it in the workplace as well, that adults with ADHD, if they had a particularly difficult childhood, not just because of the parents, but because of their ADHD, bullied at school, made to feel less than, that can be put upon in the workplace. And it's really, really core to this self-esteem, but it is incredibly difficult to look into. So what I will say is there's lots of areas on the internet where you can look at self-directed healing work. However, because this is a very, very difficult area, if you do need to dig in and you did have a particularly traumatic childhood, then we would urge you to do this through a therapist, just to be safe, Steph, wouldn't we?
Yeah, definitely. An ADHD informed therapist, again, really, really important, because yeah, a lot of people come to me when they come to me for coaching, if they've received therapy. If it's not an ADHD informed therapist, it's never been very helpful for them. So yeah, make sure you get a recommendation from, say, another ADHD that's had therapy that's been very effective.
Yeah. And this is one of the keys to kind of unlocking this flourishing life and this codependency particularly. And one of our members has just said in the chat that she thought it was her limpet syndrome, which I really, really like. Codependency to unsuitable partners, which I have done all my life, all my life. And I love the phrase limpet syndrome. And until we address that and sort of have that partners that are worthy of us, and we get our self-worth kind of sorted because of our childhood traumas, we're going to have these challenges and issues, in all our relationships, friendships as well. I've had these situations, and with business partners where I've exhibited codependent behaviors, and that kind of trust and trying to win people over is what happens. And I think this is why we wanted to look into it. Going on from last week, when we looked at parenting, it seemed natural to kind of look at this, and it kept cropping up in the conversations we had in the community, didn't it?
Yeah.
And what we need to do is break that chain. And it's not so much just about breaking the chain with our own children, as we've discussed, but kind of going back up the generational tree, like maybe looking at your cousins. How many people can we save if we address ADHD properly and they get diagnosed as kids? It's huge. It's absolutely massive. If you look at my family, if you look at your family, Steph, it's not just our own kids. It's multi generational, right through that tree, cousins, second cousins, the works.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, the impact is huge, and it really is very genetic. ADHD runs in families; it's rampant. And when you do kind of look back and you kind of see the kind of patterns and the addictions, substance abuse, self-harm, some, unfortunately, sometimes suicides, it's a very bleak, very, very depressing picture that we have a chance to do something about. This generation, our generation, being informed about ADHD, we have that opportunity to be able to break this chain. Now, it's not easy. A lot of us ADHDers, when we find out we've got ADHD and we know that, oh, maybe our brother, our sister, or our parents might have it, and then, of course, we feel that we need to share this information with our parents, our family members, and it's not always met very well. And we have done a bit of work, haven't we, in ADHD Unlocked, about how to go about this, because it's really, when you can't help your own family, it can be very distressing. And actually, you know, when it's high stakes for us, we tend to become a little bit more intense about things, which tends to put off other people, particularly our own family members, who definitely do not like being told what to do, you know, by you. So it's a bit of a, you've got to be a bit strategic about it.
Yeah, and we've covered several topics that are helpful to deal with this, haven't we? So boundaries, my mum's no longer alive, but I would imagine if we were still repairing our relationship, we'd have to put boundaries in place there in order to communicate properly with her, and to kind of, I can imagine how she would take this, but also all of the ADHD knowledge and the myth busting and the communicating your ADHD to your family that we've also covered would be really, really, really helpful here. But a
Yeah.
lot of our members have said that their parents have been really dismissive of their ADHD. And this is where we have to kind of, write the script, practice these conversations, kind of say, this is how it's impacted me, prepare, fill your tank so that you're not going to have that high stakes emotion, to kind of draw the emotion out of it so that you can just get the facts across and let them make that decision and let
Yeah.
them digest that knowledge in their own kind of space and time without the emotion kind of clouding it, I think is really,
So,
really important.
so hard though, isn't it? Because it's that RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria, in ADHD families and interactions is off the scale. I mean, how many, I don't know, in your own family, Michelle, but you know, in terms of family members not talking to other family members, kind of cutting the relationship off, and it's, which actually in my family, it's happened. Anyway, I haven't shared that this week. Don't want to kind of go into it right now, but actually, you know, and this is the thing, see, out of sight, out of mind, sometimes we don't we don't really appreciate how these things affect us, and what's happened as a result, until we're kind of given this space. And but thankfully, in the context with support from all the other members, all you other ADHDers that get it, that probably have experienced the same thing in your own families or extended families. And yeah, it just doesn't have to be like this, guys. It just, if everyone knew, if our families understood the ADHD, if we could all see each other through that ADHD lens, right, and appreciate that we're all doing our best and getting the help that we need, it could be different.
Yeah, absolutely. And just picking up some comments from the Facebook group chat, somebody said my mum was amazing but would not have entertained my ADHD diagnosis. If that's the case, you just have to provide the information and then maybe look at the subsequent generations, your cousins, and going through all of that lens. You can only lead a horse to water, and don't sort of, I don't know what the word is, make yourself at detriment to try and get other people to see. You can do so much, and then it's over to them. So, I mean, I know codependency can sometimes reach over into helping other people more. So don't let any codependent tendencies that you may have influence this. You can do your best, share the knowledge, and then it's over to them to make that decision, but help who you can and give the knowledge.
Yeah,
And lots of people saying that their family are not entertaining these diagnoses, so it's just all about education here,
yeah.
and busting that stigma.
No, that's right. And from personal experience as well, it is best not to kind of push it at your family members. And actually, the best thing you can do is kind of model, you know, by example. So just talk when, you know, when you're talk about it generally. Talk about, you know, your own ADHD and how this treatment has done this for you, and oh, you're so grateful. And just make it about you and your family members. You know, they'll digest it, they'll pick up on it. I'm sure they're pretty smart too. And then they will, when it's time, because you know we tend to be operating on our own time, when it's time for them, they will probably approach you quite sheepishly, maybe. And seek that support. It will come. And again, patience is not something that we have in spades, but it's worth it. It's
Yeah.
worth it.
And I had, just to share an instance recently. It wasn't an actual relative, but it was a relative of one of my exes, I suggested that this child had ADHD, and at first they got really angry. They got angry, and the other parent got angry as well, about my suggestion. But then slowly they digested it. They came back to me a couple of weeks later. They asked my advice. I recommended somewhere where to go for assessment. They've now been assessed. They're now on meds, and they're now doing the work, and they've now got their diagnosis. So at first they may get angry. So just to share that story, that that person is now, only 12 years old, but now on the road. But at first I didn't think that it was going to be entertained by the parents. So really interesting. There's some questions come up about codependency, which is a massive, massive topic, which I think we need to cover at some point in the ADHD Unlocked community. But if you do some googling, there's Codependence Anonymous. It basically, codependency is that mindset where you put other people in front of your own well-being, and your self-esteem's low. You stay in relationships, for example, which are no longer suitable because you feel it's your fault. There's all sorts of stuff around the issue of codependency, which is incredibly common with adults with ADHD and does often stem from our childhoods because of this undiagnosed ADHD running through families.
Because it's that kind of coping strategy that, oh well, I don't have needs. That's fine. Just and then carrying that kind of same attitude into your relationships, which is very dangerous, obviously, and not healthy for us ADHDers. So if you don't have support, you definitely need to get it. And we definitely invite you to join ADHD Unlocked, join our community and get educated. We cover all these topics, particularly communication and boundaries. So important to understand what your needs are, and be able to set and communicate boundaries to others as well.
Yeah, and this week's been incredibly important, that sharing that we did in the Monday session, the long webinar session, and subsequently in the meetings that we've had this week. The stories are so similar, guys, so don't feel alone. And this is one of the reasons we created ADHD Unlocked, so that we don't feel alone. We've got such similar histories and similar pains, and we can all deal with them together, and it's just been brilliant. And thank you for all your messages, because I know I shared a lot and got upset on Monday, and I'm absolutely fine. I'm a bit tired, but it's great because I'm now working through more of what I thought I'd already done. So but it's great. This is what we need to do, isn't it, Steph?
That's exactly it. I mean, just kind of what I just showed just before as well. I hadn't really thought about, here we are talking about intergenerational impact, and I hadn't even thought about what happened, in my family in terms of a kind of cut off of a relationship there. And this is the thing, us ADHD we're verbal processors. There's so much going on up here. We don't really know or appreciate actually what's going on out there. And so the more we talk about it together, in a supported group, the better, the more aware we can become, and we can proactively start living our lives and setting our direction and creating the relationships that are healthy for us and that will bring us joy. Get educated, right? It's always been, I think, and supported, and connect with others that get it. So if you're not yet a member, do come and join us. I think next week we're moving away from the heavy kind of parenting and intergenerational impact of ADHD. I think next week we're doing the senses, sensory integration. So all the kind of sensory sensitivities that we have. And already just this week in one of our chats, one of our members gave some advice or talked about, shared a strategy that works for her in relation to one of our other members' son who's got ASD as well as ADHD. And apparently that strategy was like bang on. It's kind of transformed after so many years. They finally kind of got some help for that problem. And that's what we're all about. Sharing strategies can really, again, be transformational. So sensory stuff next week.
Excellent. But do bear in mind, if you are going to look into this stuff, to make sure your tank is full. Put yourself first, put your own oxygen mask on first. And if you can't deal with extended family and any of the hassles, put yourself first. It's only, there to share the information if you can handle it. If you're at max capacity, as some of our commenters have said, don't go there, just share the information and let them deal with it themselves. But take care of you. take
Yeah.
care of you first, and then you'll have the capacity to help other people if, if that's what's needed. But put yourself first, and once you start doing that, you'll find that you've got more in your cup to give others anyway.
Yeah, such an important point. Yeah. Okay.
So, and thank you all for your lovely comments this week. It's been a particularly hard week. You've all done incredibly well, but we'll continue this conversation and support within the group. But do join us. Go to adhdunlocked.co.uk/shop and become a member. The membership is growing and it's great, and you guys are hugely inspirational. So thank you all so much. So keep warm, keep well, and top up your tanks this week, everybody, and take care. And we will see you next week for sensory issues. So thank you everybody for joining us. Thanks again, everybody. Bye
All right.
bye.
Have a good weekend.
Bye bye.